My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 32 years old. 2 weeks ago, at the family will meeting in my parents' dining room in Middlebury, Vermont, my father slid a leather folder across the table and read his sentence like a verdict. "You're the responsible one, Claire. You'll care for your brother when we're gone. But that doesn't mean you get a share." My mother nodded along the way she nods at church announcements. My brother stared at his hands. They had planned the rest of my life as a caregiver without asking me a single question. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't reach for water. I only asked one thing. "Dad," I said, "what was on the page you tore out of that folder?" My father's Mont Blanc pen rolled off the table and hit the floor. He did not pick it up. If a story already has you sitting up straighter, please take 1 second to hit like and subscribe. It tells me to keep telling the real ones. And drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. I'm Claire. This is the story of the page my father tore out of his folder and what happened when the rest of the family read the original. Let's go back 3 weeks to a Wednesday in November. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Burlington, Vermont. The kind of building where the radiators clang in winter and the windows let in the smell of the lake in summer. I am a case manager nurse at Burlington Regional Hospital. My job is to build care plans for patients who can't quite advocate for themselves, elderly patients with 3 insurance plans, adults with developmental disabilities whose parents are aging out, kids with chronic conditions whose families are drowning in paperwork. I read documents for a living. I notice what's missing in them. That detail matters later. On my kitchen counter sits a laminated patient binder I take to every home visit. Next to it, a black moleskin notebook I've carried since nursing school. I write everything down. My patients' med changes, my grocery list, the exact words my parents say at family dinners. I started doing that when I was 22. My brother is named Owen. He is 27 years old, 5 years younger than me. He has high-functioning autism, what the doctors now call level 1. He was diagnosed when he was 4 and I was 9. I still remember the waiting room, the smell of old magazines that had been touched by too many hands, lemon cleaner over something sourer underneath, a box of plastic toys in the corner that nobody was playing with. Owen lives in a small 1-bedroom house at the end of my parents' street. He works part-time as a shelf stocker at the Hannaford supermarket in Middlebury. 4 years now. He rides his bike there in the warm months, and he texts me a photo every time a new cereal flavor appears in aisle 6. He is not the person my parents describe to the rest of the family, to our cousins, to the church, to the neighbors who bring zucchini in August. My parents describe Owen as a child still, a man who can't be left alone with a stove, who can't manage his own money, who can't survive without a designated keeper. That is the version of Owen they sell to the world. The Owen I know remembers every birthday in the extended family. He keeps a paper budget in a small spiral notebook. He once corrected my sodium intake at Thanksgiving. My parents are Howard and Eleanor Whitmore. My father was a mechanical engineer at the General Electric plant in Burlington for 31 years. He retired 5 years ago. He wears the same pair of brown leather shoes every Sunday and signs every Christmas card with the same pen, a Mont Blanc my mother gave him for their 10th anniversary. My mother taught 3rd grade at the Middlebury Elementary School for 28 years before she retired. She is on the parish council at St. Stephen's Episcopal. She runs the Christmas cookie drive. She is the woman everyone in town calls such a lovely mother. They live in a white colonial with green shutters, on a street where every house has a porch swing, and every neighbor knows when you change your hedges. On the wall above their dining room sideboard hangs a photograph in a thin silver frame. The 4 of us at the family lake house in the summer of 2010. I am 17, holding Owen's shoulder as he squints into the sun. My parents stand behind us, smiling for the camera, as if the lake house has always been theirs. I will come back to that photograph. On the 15th of October this year, my father sent a group text to me and Owen. It read, "Family will meeting, Saturday, November 29th, 1 p.m. The house. Important, please be on time." That was the message. No subject, no agenda, no mention of a lawyer. I read it twice. I put the phone face down on my kitchen counter. I poured a glass of water. I knew something was off 3 weeks before that meeting. There is a sentence my father has said to me at least once a year since I was 17. Claire is the responsible one. He said it the morning I got my driver's license, standing in the DMV parking lot with the laminated card still warm in my hand. He said it at my high school graduation, in front of the principal and 3 of my teachers. He said it at my college graduation, at my nursing pinning ceremony, at every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, always with his palm flat on my shoulder, always with his voice pitched just low enough to sound like a compliment. The hand was the thing. The hand was heavy. It did not move. It told everyone in the room that I belonged to him. It was not praise, it was an assignment. The first time I understood it as an assignment, I was 9 years old. We were in the parking lot of the developmental pediatrician's office in Burlington, the autumn of 2002. Owen was 4. He had just been diagnosed. My mother was crying in the front seat with the door open, one foot on the asphalt, holding the manila envelope of paperwork like it was a wet animal. My father stood by the rear bumper, not crying, looking at the building. He turned and he looked at me. "Claire," he said, "your mom and I are going to need your help with your brother." I nodded. I was 9. I would have nodded at anything that made my mother stop crying. "You're a good girl," he said. "Some kids are made for big things. Some kids are made to look after the people doing big things. You and me, we're the second kind. We help." I remember the smell of the parking lot, wet leaves, and gasoline. For the next 13 years, every important decision about my life rooted through that sentence. When I was 12, I wanted to do gymnastics. I had clipped the registration form from the back of a Y brochure and carried it in my backpack for 3 days, folded into a smaller and smaller square. My father did not say no. He reminded me, over supper, that Owen got out of school at 2:50, that nobody else could walk him, that 7-year-olds in November get cold quickly. I did not unfold the form again. I threw it out behind the garage so my mother would not find it in the trash. When I was 14, The guidance counselor handed me a glossy pamphlet for a summer marine biology program on the coast of Maine. Tide pools, dorms, a scholarship line at the bottom in blue ink. I brought it home and put it on the kitchen table next to my mother's coffee. She read it. She smiled, the small, careful smile she uses when she is about to disappoint someone gently. "Oh, sweetheart, August is the lake house. We always go to the lake house." Owen would notice. She slid the pamphlet back across the table to me. The tide pools on the cover were turquoise. The coffee ring she had left on the corner was already drying brown. I did not fill out the application. When I was 16, I came home from school to find Owen sitting on the front steps in the rain because nobody had picked him up. He was 11. He was confused. He was wet. I dried him off, made him soup, and didn't say anything to my parents. That was the year I started writing things down. The first moleskin notebook I ever owned. Black cover. Elastic band. Inside the front cover, I wrote my name and the date in pen, September of my junior year. The first entry was 3 words. Owen on steps. I still have that notebook in a shoebox on my closet shelf. By the time I was 17, my father had refined the sentence into a strategy. He stopped saying, "We help." He started saying, "Claire is the responsible one," always in front of someone, a relative leaning against the buffet at Thanksgiving, a neighbor on the front porch in August, a teacher at parent-teacher night, nodding the slow, careful nod of an adult who has just been told something they will repeat. Always with that same hand on my shoulder. Always with that low, warm voice that sounds on a tape like love. It is hard to argue with public praise. It is harder still when you are 17 and your parents have spent 8 years describing you to the world as the kind of daughter who does not argue. By then, the description has done the work for them. The neighbors believe it. The teachers believe it. You believe it. You catch yourself nodding along when someone repeats it back to you at the grocery store. You become the sentence. The morning of my 18th birthday, my father slid a card across the breakfast table. White envelope, my name in his careful engineer's print. Every letter the same height, every gap between letters the same width. Inside the card was a check for $200 and 1 line of writing. "Now your real work begins." No exclamation point, no signature underneath. Just the line, centered on the inside of the card, the way he would center a label on a blueprint. I put the card back in the envelope. I put the envelope in the drawer where my mother kept the good silverware. I ate my toast. I did not ask what work. I knew what work. He Lake House was the place where the assignment felt the most like a vacation. It sits on 28 acres on the western shore of Lake Champlain, a small cedar-shingled house gone silver with weather, a dock that groans in August, a rope swing my grandfather knotted himself in the summer of '73. The kitchen has a green Formica counter the color of a Coke bottle, and a single window that looks straight out over the water. In the morning, that window holds the whole lake in its rectangle. In the evening, it holds the sunset. Every summer of my childhood, we drove up together in my father's Buick. My mother packed tuna sandwiches in waxed paper. My father packed his fishing rods in their canvas tube. Owen packed the same brown stuffed bear in the same red corduroy backpack year after year until he was 13 and quietly retired the bear to a shelf in his bedroom without saying anything about it to anyone. I was told every year that the lake house was for the whole family. I was told it the way you tell a child a fact about the weather. I never heard the word trust. I never heard the word irrevocable. I never heard the name Theodore Whitman. What I was told instead was that my grandmother had given it to your parents a long time ago. The story was always the same. The pronouns were always the same. The verb was always given. Past tense. Settled. Done. I believed it. So did Owen. May of 2015. The lawn at the University of Vermont. Late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everyone in a black robe look photogenic and dishonest at the same time. I had just walked across the stage with a nursing degree. I had a job lined up at Burlington Regional Hospital. Case manager track, full benefits, a start date 2 weeks out. My father stood beside me on the grass and shook my hand for the photographer. A long handshake. A handshake for the camera. Then he leaned in close. He smelled like aftershave and the inside of the Buick. "Now you're close, Claire," he said into my ear. "Now you can be there for him." He did not mean Burlington. He meant the 45-minute drive south on Route 7 to Middlebury. He meant every Saturday for the rest of my life. I smiled for the camera. My jaw ached from smiling. That night I drove to my new apartment. I unpacked one box. I sat on the bare mattress with the moleskin open on my knee, and I wrote one line. He thinks I came back for him. I came back for the hospital. I closed the notebook. I sat in the dark for a long time. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie while I was writing it. I had not moved back for the hospital. I had moved back because Vermont was the only place I knew. Because Owen lived there. Because some part of me, the part my father had been pouring into for 16 years, still believed I owed my brother hours, days, weekends, a future. And that the only honest address for that debt was a 45-minute drive away. And then a single tea visit changed everything. The August I started nursing school, I moved out. I was 22. The apartment was on Pearl Street, 2 rooms above a dry cleaner, with a window that looked down on the Dunkin' drive-thru. The first night, I sat on the mattress with the lights off and listened. The radiator clicked. A car idled in the Dunkin' lane. Someone 2 floors up was watching a baseball game. None of it was for me. None of it was about me. Nobody was coming to my door at 11:45 to ask where the orange juice was. Nobody was scheduling supper for 6:15 sharp. Nobody was brushing their teeth too loud on the other side of the wall. That last one was Owen. Owen brushed his teeth like he was sanding wood. I started crying around midnight. I did not know I was going to. It took me the rest of that first year to understand what the crying had been about. It had not been loneliness. It had been the sound of my brother's toothbrush missing. I missed him. I did not miss my parents. Those are 2 different sentences. They are not in the same family. My father had not wanted me to move out. He had offered to convert the attic into a private suite. Twice, both times, across the kitchen table, both times with a pencil already in his hand and a sketch already half drawn on a napkin. He had offered 3 separate times to build something behind the garage, a studio, a cottage, a little house with my own door so the engineer in him could solve the problem of his daughter wanting to leave. Not one of those offers was phrased as a favor to me. Every one of them was phrased as a favor to Owen. "He's used to you being there," my father said. "He'll adjust," I said. He had. My parents had not. By the 3rd year in that apartment, my mother had built a phone routine, the way other women build a garden. Every Sunday at 6:30, the phone rang. Always 6:30. Never 6:28. Never 6:33. She called from the kitchen after the dishes, with the dishwasher humming behind her. I could hear it through the line, the low industrial rhythm of a house I had escaped. She would talk for 45 minutes, never less. She would ask about my shifts. She would ask about the weather in Burlington. And then, always near minute 20, she would mention Owen. A doctor's appointment that week. A small mood at supper on Tuesday. A thing he had said about missing me. Then, casually, the way someone passes the salt. "Could you come down this weekend?" For 2 years, I came down most weekends. When I started saying no, the calls changed. They got longer, they got quieter. Her voice dropped to the register she used at funerals. "I just don't think your brother understands why you don't want to be here." She always said be here, not visit, not see him, be here. 1 syllable, 2 words. A door that was supposed to stay open in only one direction. By the time I was 28, my parents had started using my own address book against me. I would text Allison that I could not make her Boston birthday weekend because of a hospital shift. And within 2 hours, my mother would forward me a screenshot of Allison's reply. "No worries. Hope work goes okay," with 3 words added underneath. Owen was hoping. No punctuation, no salutation. Just the line hanging there. If I mentioned to a friend that I had spent a long weekend in Maine, my father would call within the week. He would say very casually that Mrs. Peterson had asked after me at the deli counter at Hannaford, and we didn't know what to tell her Claire. They were narrating me to the town. They were narrating me as absent, as ungrateful as the daughter who took her vacations while her brother sat at home. The narration worked in both directions. The town heard their version. My version had nowhere to land. I started noticing the shape of it, the timing, the phrasing, the little phrases that always came back to me through a third mouth. I started writing those down too. By the holidays of 2023, I had stopped going to my parents' house on Christmas Eve. I drove down on Christmas morning instead. I ate the same dry turkey at the same dining room table. I drank exactly 1 glass of wine. After lunch, I would put my coat on without announcing it and ask Owen if he wanted to walk to the lake at the edge of the property. He always said yes. We always took the same path through the leafless apple trees. We always stopped at the same flat rock at the shoreline. I always drove back to Burlington before the casseroles came out at 6. My mother started seating me in a new chair. Always the same chair. Always to Owen's left. Always the seat farthest from the head of the table, where my father sat with the carving knife and the conversation in front of him. The conversation flowed up the table. It flowed toward him. It did not flow back to me. I sat in my chair and I cut Owen's meat without being asked. the way I had cut it since he was 8, and I watched the silver candelabra throw its small reflection of me across the polished wood. It was not a seat at the table, it was a seating chart of an assignment. By last winter, Owen had been living in his own small house at the end of my parents' street for 2.5 years. He was 26. He was stocking shelves at the Hannaford 4 days a week. He was riding his bike to work in the warm months and walking it in the cold. He was keeping a paper budget in a spiral notebook. By every measure I could find in any medical chart, and I have read a lot of medical charts, he was doing well. My parents kept telling the relatives he was struggling. They kept telling the church he was fragile. They kept telling the cousins he could not be left alone with a stove. They kept telling the neighbors who brought zucchini in August that he needed his sister 45 minutes north. They kept telling the world he needed me. And every Sunday at 6:30, the phone rang in my Burlington kitchen, and on the other end my mother described a brother I did not recognize. Then, in November, Owen said something that didn't fit. Quick question before we keep going. Was there ever someone in your family who got crowned the responsible one so they could be quietly used? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not the only one who lived inside that title. The 5th of November this year, a Wednesday, I was sitting across from Owen at Carol's Cafe in Middlebury. It is a small coffee shop on Main Street with mismatched mugs and a chalkboard that announces the soup of the day in our librarian's handwriting. Owen had finished his shift at Hannaford. He had ridden his bike over. He was eating a blueberry scone in the precise, methodical way he eats most things, one quadrant at a time, never 2 bites in a row. He had been telling me about a new label on the milk shelf. Then he stopped, the way he sometimes stops mid-sentence, and he looked up at me. "Claire," he said, "Mom said you're going to take care of me forever, right?" I did not put down my mug. I did not blink. "What did she say, Owen?" He thought about it carefully. He always thinks about it carefully. "She said, when she and Dad are gone, you'll be in charge of me. She said you wanted it to be that way. She said it was decided a long time ago." I made my face look the same as it had looked when he started talking. "When did she tell you that?" I asked. "In the summer at the lake house." "Just once?" He took a long sip of water and counted on his fingers. 5 times, I think, maybe 6. I asked him if Dad had said it too. He nodded once. I asked him what he had said back. "I said okay," Owen said. "I always say okay." I drove back to Burlington that night with the heater turned up and the radio off. I did not call my mother. I did not call my father. I drove to my apartment, sat on the floor next to my couch, and opened my black moleskin. I wrote, "Owen said 5 times, maybe 6. Underneath that, I wrote, "She said you wanted it to be that way." I sat there for a long time. 10 days later, I drove to my grandmother's house for tea. My grandmother is Constance Whitmore. She is 82 years old. She lives in a white clapboard house on Seymour Street in Middlebury, 2 blocks from the Green. The house was built in 1820. Her husband, my grandfather, died when I was 11. She still drives. She still beats me at gin rummy. She does not host my parents often. I do not know exactly when my father and his mother fell out of step. I do remember, dimly, that it had something to do with the way my father handled his own father's estate. There was a year in my early 20s when nobody mentioned my grandmother at family dinners. The tea visit was a Saturday, mid-November. I had brought her a tin of shortbread from the bakery on Pearl Street. She made tea in her Wedgwood pot, the one she always uses, the one that has a chip on the spout. We talked about ordinary things for a while, her hip, her bird feeder, a cousin in Maine. Then she set her cup down carefully and said, "Are your parents still pretending the Vermont Trust doesn't exist?" I did not answer. I could not at first. She watched me the way she watches everything. She had used the words the way someone uses a word they assume the other person already knows. "I'm sorry," I said. "What trust?" She paused. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. The kitchen clock ticked. "Oh, Claire," she said. She poured me more tea. She did not say anything else about it that afternoon. She changed the subject to the church choir. She walked me to my car when I left. She kissed my temple at the door. I drove home along Route 7. The leaves were down. The trees were black against the November sky. I did not turn on the radio. I parked at my building and I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I went inside. In my apartment, I opened the closet in my hallway. I pulled down a cardboard box of old school papers I had not touched in 8 years. I went through it page by page. I was looking for anything from my grandmother. Cards, letters, a photo. Near the bottom of the box, I found a Christmas card from when I was 10. The card had a small business envelope tucked inside it. The envelope was addressed to my parents in my grandmother's handwriting. The return address read, Whitman and Hayes, LLP, Estate Planning, Burlington, Vermont. The envelope was empty, but the name on it was the same name my grandmother had said on her porch when I was a child. The name I had not thought about in 20 years. Theodore Whitman. I closed the box. I sat down at my kitchen table. I opened the moleskin. I wrote Theodore Whitman, Whitman and Hayes, Burlington. Underneath that, I wrote, "She said the word like it was something I should already know." I called the office at 9 the next Monday morning. The receptionist was older. Her voice was kind. I gave her my name and my grandmother's name, and I asked whether Mr. Whitman could possibly remember anything about a Whitmore estate matter from the early 2000s. She put me on hold for 2 minutes. Then a man's voice, calm, New England, slow. "Claire, I have been wondering when you would call." I sat down at my kitchen table. I put the phone on speaker. I opened the moleskin to a fresh page. "Mr. Whitman," I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know how to ask this. My grandmother mentioned a trust. I don't know anything about it." There was a small sound on the other end. It might have been a sigh. It might have been a breath of relief. "Claire," he said, "your grandmother set up an irrevocable trust in your name on June 4th, 2003. The assets at the time included her Lake Champlain property and a portfolio of securities. You were named the sole beneficiary. Your parents were named co-trustees until you reached the age of 35. I wrote the date down. Then I wrote my own age in 2003 next to it. 10. I asked him what was in the trust now. He told me the value. As of last quarter. He said the number twice, once slowly, once at normal speed. The way doctors do when they want a patient to remember. $2.4 million, give or take, between the lake house and the portfolio. I did not say anything for a while. "Mr. Whitman," I finally said, "do my parents know that I don't know?" He answered carefully, "I would assume so, yes." I asked him to send me a copy of the trust document. He said he would send it overnight by FedEx, and that he would also include the schedule of assets and the most recent annual accounting. He said the original was, of course, in the firm's vault. He paused. "Claire," he said, "your grandmother is alive, of sound mind, and aware of this conversation. Anything you want to do regarding this trust, she will support." I told him I needed to think. I hung up. I sat at my table. I did not open the notebook for a long time. The package arrived the next afternoon. A FedEx envelope at my apartment door. Inside was a black binder with the firm's name embossed on the cover. I sat on the floor of my living room and I read. I read for 3 hours. I read the trust instrument, the schedule of assets, the appointment of trustees, the language about distribution at age 35. I read the part that named the lake house, 28 acres, parcel D, deed reference, as a trust asset. I read the part that said the trustees had a fiduciary duty to the beneficiary. I read the part that said any unauthorized distribution would be a breach. I read the names. Howard Whitmore, trustee. Eleanor Whitmore, trustee. Claire Elizabeth Whitmore, beneficiary. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I did not eat. I called Allison. Allison is my cousin. She is my uncle's daughter, on my father's younger brother's only child. She is 30 years old. She works as a senior paralegal at a firm called Hadley Pickering in Boston. She does estate planning. I had not asked her for a professional favor in my life. She picked up on the second ring. I told her what I knew. I read her parts of the binder out loud. She made me read the asset schedule twice. She said, "Claire, I'm driving up tomorrow." She arrived on Tuesday afternoon with a laptop bag, 2 boxes of pizza from a place in Cambridge, and a folder of her own. We sat at my kitchen table for 2 days. The first thing Allison did was lay out the trust instrument flat under the lamp. She read every page. She took notes in green ink. She asked me questions about the lake house, when we used it, who had keys, whose name was on the property tax bills. I did not know whose name was on the property tax bills. "That's fine," she said. "I can pull it." She pulled it that afternoon from the Addison County Land Records online. The lake house had been deeded into the trust in 2003. The trust held the property. My parents had no individual ownership of it. None. The taxes had been paid from the trust account since 2004. The next thing Allison wanted to see was the annual accountings. The binder included 19 of them, one for each fiscal year since the trust was established. She read them backward. She started with the most recent one and worked toward the oldest. By the third accounting, she stopped. She turned the laptop toward me. She pointed at a line item. "Claire," she said, "look at this." The line item was for a withdrawal from the portfolio in 2019. $50,000. The reason given was trustee discretionary distribution. There was no signature from the beneficiary. There was no record of a corresponding distribution to me. I had never received any money from this trust. We kept reading. We found a withdrawal of $38,000 in 2020. a withdrawal of $42,000 in 2021, a withdrawal of $26,000 in 2022, a withdrawal of $19,000 last year. Allison opened a spreadsheet on her laptop. She entered the numbers. She subtotaled $187,000. She looked at me across the table. "That's a fiduciary breach," she said. "That's prosecutable as a civil claim. Depending on intent, possibly criminal." I closed the moleskin. The third day, Allison asked to see the amendments. I had not noticed there were amendments. The binder had a tab labeled Amendments near the back. I had skipped it because I assumed amendments were technical things. Corrections of typos, updates of trustee addresses. There were 2 amendments in the binder. The first one was from 2010. It was a routine update of the address of the secondary trustee. The second one was dated April 18th of last year. It changed the name of the sole beneficiary. From Claire Elizabeth Whitmore to Owen Philip Whitmore, Allison read the signature line. Then she pulled out a folder from her own bag and laid 2 documents next to each other. One was a copy of the original trust signature page from 2003. The other was the signature page from last year's amendment. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she turned the laptop screen toward me and zoomed in. "Claire," she said, "look at the way she crosses her T." I looked. The T in Constance on the 2003 document was crossed with a small upward flick on the right side. A signature flourish my grandmother had been using since she was a teacher in the 60s. I have seen it on every Christmas card my entire life. The T on the amendment was crossed with a flat horizontal line, like a 3rd grader. The signature on the amendment was not my grandmother's. It was a forgery. Allison turned to me. "Mom," she said. "That's your mom's handwriting, Claire. That's Eleanor. The 3rd of December, a Wednesday. I asked Owen to meet me at Carol's Cafe. Same booth, same time." He showed up in his blue Hannaford windbreaker, the one with the small bleach stain on the cuff. He set his bike helmet on the bench beside him. He ordered a hot chocolate and the blueberry scone. I had not slept properly in 2 weeks. I had a folder in my bag and a script in my head, and a fear in my chest that what I was about to say would break my brother. I waited for him to start eating. "Owen," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it the way you actually feel, not the way you think I want." He looked up at me. He set his fork down. He folded his hands in his lap. That is what he does when he is paying full attention. "Okay, Claire, have Mom and Dad ever told you that I want to take care of you for the rest of your life?" He thought. He looked at the chalkboard with the soup of the day. Tomato bisque. "Yes." "Did they say I picked it, like I chose it?" "Yes." "Did they tell you to tell me about it? Did they ask you to bring it up?" He took a long breath. He looked back at me. "Yes, Mom told me to remind you in September. She said you forget sometimes." I wanted to put my head on the table. I did not. "Owen, do you want me to be in charge of you for the rest of your life?" He looked at his hands. "I don't want to be in charge of you either." He smiled at the corner of his mouth. The small smile he does when something is both sad and funny. "I don't want that for either of us, Claire." He pulled his small spiral notebook from his jacket pocket. It is a notebook he carries everywhere, for his work schedules, his pay stubs, his bike maintenance. He opened to a clean page. He drew a horizontal line down the middle of it. He wrote one word on top. "Choose." He looked up at me. "I want to choose where I live," he said. "I want to choose what time I get up. I want to choose what's in my fridge. I want to keep my job. I want to ride my bike." He paused. "I want to see you on Saturdays. Not because I have to, because I want to." He drew a second line. Then he wrote in capital letters on the right side, "Not a prison guard." He turned the notebook to face me. "Claire," he said, "I don't want you to be my prison guard." I picked up the notebook in both hands. I looked at the line. I read it 3 times. I was not going to cry in front of him in a cafe. I cried later, in my car in the lot of the Cumberland Farms on Route 7, north of Virgin. For the rest of the conversation, I told him the truth, slowly, piece by piece. I told him there was a trust. I told him our grandmother had set it up when I was 10. I told him the lake house was in it. I told him there was money in it. I told him our parents had been pulling money out of it without telling either of us. I told him about the amendment with our mother's forged signature. I told him our parents had been planning to make him the only beneficiary of that money and to make me his caregiver, with no share, no land, no future of my own. He listened the way he listens to everything, with his hands folded, with his eyes on my face, with no interruption. When I was done, he said one thing. "They told you that you wanted it. They told me that you wanted it." He paused. "I'm not happy about that, Claire. That is the strongest sentence I have ever heard my brother say." I asked him if he would be willing to come to a second meeting that Mr. Whitman was going to set up. I told him my grandmother and Allison would be there. I told him Mom and Dad would be there. I told him he did not have to say anything. He looked at me for a long time. "I'll come," he said. "I'd like to wear my interview clothes." His interview clothes are a gray button-down he bought at the Hannaford uniform sale 4 years ago, and a pair of navy pants he keeps pressed in a closet bag. I told him he could wear whatever he wanted. We finished the scone in pieces. He took half, I took half. We did not talk about the trust again that afternoon. We talked about birds. He had seen a pileated woodpecker on his ride to work that morning. He was very excited about it. When he got back on his bike to ride home, he stopped at the door. "Claire," he said, "I'm going to keep this notebook page, the one with choose on it. Is that okay?" "That's yours, Owen." "Okay, I want to remember what it says when I see them." He pushed off into the cold. I sat at the table by myself for 10 minutes after he was gone. I left a tip on the napkin. I walked to my car. In the parking lot of the Cumberland Farms on Route 7, I called Theodore Whitman. "He wants to come," I said. "I'll send the notice tomorrow," Theodore said. I did not say anything else. I drove the rest of the way back to Burlington in silence. That night, I wrote in the moleskin. Owen drew a line. He wrote, "Choose." He gave me back 22 years, the 7th of December, a Sunday. Theodore Whitman sent the formal notice that morning. Hard copies by certified mail to all parties. A meeting at his office. Saturday the 13th of December, 9 in the morning. Purpose described in lawyerly language as review of trust administration and beneficiary status. Attendees, my parents, myself, my brother, my grandmother, my great-aunt Adelaide as witness, Allison as paralegal of record, a notary public, a second state attorney from the firm. Theodore had a category for every person in that room. The notice arrived at my parents' house in Middlebury on Monday afternoon. I know what time it arrived because my mother called me at 4:12 p.m. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, 40 seconds long. She used the voice she uses for funerals. "Claire, honey, something came in the mail today that doesn't make any sense. Your father is going to call you. Please pick up. We need to fix this before it spirals." I did not call her back. My father called me at 6:30 p.m. He did not leave a voicemail. He called again at 8:15 p.m. He did not leave a voicemail. He called again the next morning at 7 a.m. He did not leave a voicemail. I went to work. I worked a full shift. I came home. I made dinner. He showed up at my apartment door at 7:42 p.m. on Wednesday, the 10th of December. I did not buzz him in. He buzzed twice. He stood in the lobby for 9 minutes. Then a neighbor came in carrying groceries and held the door open for him, the way people in Vermont do. He knocked on my door. I checked the peephole. He was in his good coat, the gray wool one. He had not shaved. I opened the door. I had also, before I opened it, hit the record button on the voice memo app on my phone in the inside pocket of my jacket. Vermont is a one-party consent state. I had checked. "Dad," I said, "I wasn't expecting you. Can I come in, Claire?" I let him in. I did not offer him tea. We sat in my small living room. He on the couch, me in the chair across from him, the phone in my pocket quietly running. He did not start with anger. He started with sadness. That is his pattern when he wants something. "Claire," he said, "your mother is devastated. Theodore Whitman is a friend of your grandmother's. He is a very old man. He is confused about a lot of things." He didn't sound confused on the phone. "You spoke to him." I did. He took a breath. He shifted on the couch. The good coat made a soft sound. "Claire, that trust was set up when you were 10 years old. Your grandmother was a different woman then. She has had episodes. She has trouble with names. You should not be making a federal case out of a document that nobody has thought about in 20 years. Allison's read it." A pause. "Allison is family. She should have come to me." "She came to me. I asked her." He shifted again. He folded his hands. He looked at me the way he looks at neighbors who park slightly over the property line. "Claire, I'm going to ask you, as your father, to call Theodore on Friday morning and cancel that meeting. We will sit down, you, me, your mother, and we will go through everything. There's no reason to involve your grandmother. There's no reason to involve a notary. There is no reason to embarrass our family. There's an amendment with Mom's handwriting on Grandma's signature line." He looked at me. He did not blink. He let the silence sit. Then he said, in the same tone he used at the parking lot in 2002, "Claire, you are making decisions you do not understand. You think a piece of paper from a senile woman is going to save you. It isn't. It is going to ruin your brother. Is that what you want? Is that what you have wanted all along?" I watched his face. I did not feel angry. I felt cold. "Dad," I said, "are you finished?" "Claire, I am asking you to think about what you are doing." "I have." He stood up. He buttoned his coat. He walked to my door. He stopped with his hand on the knob. "Saturday is going to be a disaster for this family, Claire. Saturday is going to be a Saturday, Dad." He left. He closed the door quietly behind him. I locked it. I leaned my back against it. I took the phone out of my jacket. I stopped the recording. I saved it to a folder I had named that morning, just in case. The folder was labeled Notes for Theodore. He had said something he didn't know I had on tape. I owe you the rest of the November 29th meeting. The hook of this story showed you the moment my father's pen rolled off the table. That was not the end of that meeting. That was the 3rd minute of it. Let me take you back. I had driven down from Burlington that morning in the snow. The forecast had been wrong. The storm had come early. I left at 11. I took Route 7 south. I drove slow. I had a black moleskin notebook in my coat pocket, a copy of the trust document in a manila folder in the passenger seat, and Allison on speakerphone for the second half of the drive. She read me the asset schedule out loud, line by line, while I drove. The lake house, the parcel ID, the portfolio, the amendment, the forgery. I told her I would not bring up the amendment that day. I told her I wanted to see what they did first. Take notes, she said. Don't say it out loud. Get them to say it. I know. I parked in front of my parents' white Colonial at 12:58. The wreath was already on the door. My mother had vacuumed. There was a roast in the oven. My father met me at the front step. He hugged me. He did not look me in the face. Owen was already there. He was in his interview clothes. He had ridden his bike. His helmet was on the hat rack. We sat in the dining room. My mother had put out place settings as if we were going to eat. There was no food on the table. There was, however, a leather folder by my father's elbow. It was the same folder he had used at family meetings my entire life. A burgundy leather portfolio with a brass corner. He had carried it to my high school graduation. He had carried it to Owen's IEP meetings. He had carried it to the bank when my grandfather died. It was the prop of his authority. He opened it. He pulled out 3 documents. He set them in a row in front of him, facing himself. He did not show us what they were. Claire, Owen, your mother and I have been talking about the future for a long time. We want to be transparent with you both. I did not say anything. Owen folded his hands. My father read from the top document. It was a will dated October of this year. He had drafted it with a Middlebury attorney named Carl Pellerin. It left the family home, the lake house property, and all liquid assets to Owen, to be administered by Howard or Eleanor Whitmore as successor trustee, or upon their incapacity, by Claire Elizabeth Whitmore as designated caregiver and trustee for the benefit of Owen Philip Whitmore. He read the words slowly. He read them like a prayer. You're the responsible one, Claire. You'll care for your brother when we're gone. But that doesn't mean you get a share. My mother nodded. My brother stared at his hands. I watched my father's hand on the folder. I watched the slight rough edge of paper that had been torn out of the top of one of the documents in the folder. I had noticed it as he opened the portfolio. I had noticed it because I had spent 3 nights reading the original document, and I knew exactly what page would be missing from a forged version. The asset schedule, the one that named the lake house, the parcel ID, the portfolio, and me. Dad, I said, what was on the page you tore out of that folder? He froze. It was a small freeze. A pause too long for an answer. The kind of pause you only catch in someone who has rehearsed. His pen rolled off the edge of the table. The Mont Blanc. It made a small ringing sound when it hit the wood floor. He did not pick it up. My mother's smile, the one she uses for parish announcements, slipped. She looked at my father. Then she looked at me. Then she touched the pearl pin on her collar. "Claire," she said, "I think you are being a little dramatic." I waited. I did not speak. My father gathered himself. "There is no page," he said. "What you are looking at is an old folder. There are loose sheets from other meetings in there. You are imagining things." "Then can I see the folder, Dad? Just to confirm." He did not slide it across the table. He closed it. My mother reached for my hand on the tablecloth. I let her take it. Her hand was cold. "Sweetheart," she said, "your father has thought about this very carefully. He's been talking to Carl for months. We're trying to make sure Owen is safe. That's all this is." "Mom," I said, "I'm not arguing with you about Owen being safe. I'm asking what was on the page." She did not answer. Owen lifted his head. "Claire," he said, "do you want me to ask?" I shook my head once, very small. He understood. He folded his hands again. My father took a long breath. He stood up. He buttoned his cardigan. He picked up his portfolio. "Claire," he said, "I think we need to take a break. Your mother and I were not expecting this kind of energy from you today. We will reconvene when you are more open to a conversation." "All right, Dad." He walked into the kitchen with the folder. My mother followed him. I sat at the table with Owen for a moment longer. He looked at me. "He didn't pick up the pen," Owen said. "No, he didn't. He always picks up the pen." "I know. I did not eat the roast." I drove back to Burlington on Route 7 North in the snow. I stopped at the Cumberland Farms in Virgin. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running, and I called Theodore. I told him what had happened. I told him about the torn-out page. I told him about Owen at the table. I told him about my mother's hand. He listened. He took notes. I could hear his pen moving. "Claire," he said, "are you willing to convene a formal meeting at my office?" "Yes, all parties present, with your grandmother, with the original trust document, with the original signature page of the amendment for comparison, with a notary, with a second attorney as witness." "Yes." "Saturday, December 13th, 9 a.m. I will send formal notice on Sunday." I told him about my brother. "He wants to come." There was a small sound on the other end of the line. Theodore is not a man who shows emotion, but I heard the small breath. "Then he should come, Claire." I drove the rest of the way home in silence. I would not break the silence first. The 13th of December, Saturday, 9 a.m. Theodore's office is on the 3rd floor of a stone building on Church Street in Burlington. The conference room has a long oak table, a wall of leather-bound books that nobody reads, and a single tall window that looks out over the pedestrian mall. I arrived at 8:30. Allison was already there, with her laptop and a printed binder labeled in green tabs. Theodore was in a charcoal suit and his wedding ring and his soft brown tie. The notary, a woman from his firm named Helen Bowers, was already at her station with the seal embosser. The second attorney was a woman named Patricia Wells. She has been at the firm for 19 years. She does not work on this file. She was there as an independent witness. My grandmother arrived at 8:45. She wore a green wool coat and her pearl earrings, and she carried her own Wedgwood teapot in a tote bag. I asked her why she had brought the teapot. "Because I'm going to want tea," she said. Adelaide arrived behind her. Same wool coat, slightly different green. She nodded to me. She nodded to Allison. She sat in the corner chair without speaking. She has been quiet her entire life. Adelaide does not waste words. Owen arrived at 8:55. He had taken the bus from Middlebury. He was in his interview clothes. He had his small spiral notebook in his hand. He had opened it to the page with the line down the middle. My parents arrived at 9 on the dot. My father was wearing the same gray wool coat from the apartment visit. My mother was wearing the dress she wears to funerals. Her face was already set. She saw my grandmother across the room, and her hand went to her pearl pin. We took our seats. Theodore at the head, my grandmother to his right, me beside her, Owen beside me, Allison beside Owen. Across from us, my parents, Patricia Wells at the foot of the table, Helen Bowers at the side table with the notary book, Adelaide in the corner. Theodore opened a black binder. "We are here," he said, "to review the administration of the Whitmore Family Irrevocable Trust, dated June 4th, 2003. Grantor, Constance Whitmore. Sole beneficiary, Claire Elizabeth Whitmore. Trustees, Howard Whitmore and Eleanor Whitmore. Successor trustee designated, Theodore Whitman." My father did not move. My mother touched her pearl pin. My father opened his portfolio. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. He set it on the table. "Theodore," he said, "this is not necessary. We are here to formalize our family's care plan for Owen. There is no trust dispute. There is only a question of how Claire is going to support her brother going forward." That was the lie. That was step one. Theodore did not look at the sheet of paper. He turned to his binder. "Howard," he said, "I would like to read aloud the schedule of assets attached to the trust instrument dated June 4th, 2003. Allison, would you bring up the document on the screen, please?" The wall-mounted screen flickered on. The asset schedule appeared. The lake house. Parcel ID. Acreage. The portfolio. Account number. The grantor's signature, my grandmother's signature, with its small upward flick on the T. My father's hand on the table did not move. He had practice at this. "That document," my father said, "is decades old. It is no longer reflective of the family's current arrangements." That was step 3. The denial. Theodore turned a page. "Howard, there is also an amendment to this trust dated April 18th of last year. Would you like to comment on the amendment?" My father looked at my mother. "I did not draft that amendment, Theodore. Did you sign it?" "I did not sign it. Eleanor signed it as trustee." "And the grantor's signature?" There was a pause. "The grantor signed it, of course." Allison clicked her trackpad. The amendment signature page appeared on the screen, next to the 2003 original signature page. Theodore did not speak. He let the two signatures sit on the screen for 10 seconds. He let everyone in the room look. Then he said, "Mother, did you sign this document on April 18th of last year?" My grandmother set her teacup on the saucer. "No, Theodore, I did not." "Are you of sound mind to make that statement?" "I am 82 years old, Theodore. I'm of sound mind to make every statement I make." "Were you in the state of Vermont on April 18th of last year?" "I was in the state of Vermont. I was at my hairdresser's that afternoon." She turned her head very slightly toward my mother. "I have not signed a document for your father's estate in 22 years, Eleanor. I have not been asked to. I have not been shown one. The signature on that screen is not mine." That was step 5, the final reveal. The silence in the room was the silence I remember from the hospital chapel the night my grandfather died. My mother did not move. My father did not move. Allison clicked the trackpad again. The bank account history appeared. 19 years of distributions. 19 years of withdrawals. The line items highlighted in yellow. 50,000, 2019. 38,000, 2020, 42, 21, 26, 22, 19, last year, $187,000. None of these distributions, Theodore said, were made to the beneficiary of the trust. None of them were authorized by the beneficiary of the trust. The beneficiary of the trust did not know the trust existed until 2 weeks ago. That was step 6, the silence after. My father looked at me. He looked at me the way he had looked at me in the parking lot in 2002. He opened his mouth. He did not have a sentence. My mother began to cry. Not loud, not full, small, practiced. The cry she had used at every family dinner for 22 years to end a conversation she was losing. It did not end this conversation. Owen stood up. I had not expected him to stand. I do not think Theodore had expected him to stand. I do not think my grandmother had expected him to stand. He held his small spiral notebook open to the page he had drawn at Carol's cafe. He looked at our parents. You told me she wanted this, he said. You told her I wanted this. He paused. He looked down at the line he had drawn down the page. She didn't want it. I didn't want it. You told both of us. You picked it for us. You told us we picked it. That is not okay. He sat down. He folded his hands. That was step 7, the loss of control. My father put his head in his hands. That was step 8, the consequences. Adelaide, in the corner, stood up. She walked the length of the conference room. She put her hand on my shoulder. She did not say anything. She did not need to. My mother lifted her head from her hands. Her face was wet, but her voice was small and tight. Owen, sweetheart, we were trying to protect you. He did not look up. You did not protect me, Mom. You used me. You used me as the reason to do something to Claire. Honey, we never used you. We did everything for you. You did everything to me, not for me. He said it without anger. He said it the way he tells me which cereal flavor changed on aisle 6. My father had still not lifted his head. My mother turned to him as if waiting for instruction. He did not give her one. Theodore turned to a fresh page in his binder. I will be filing the following with the Vermont Superior Court on Monday morning, he said. First, a petition to remove Howard and Eleanor Whitmore as trustees, with cause. Second, a petition to appoint a successor trustee, namely myself, pursuant to the original trust instrument. Third, a demand for restitution of the unauthorized distributions, plus accrued interest, payable within 90 days. He did not raise his voice. He read like a man reading his grocery list. The amendment dated April 18th of last year will be filed with the court as void on its face. Whether the state's attorney chooses to pursue the forgery as a criminal matter is not my decision. My responsibility is to the trust and to my client. He looked at my grandmother. He looked at me, both of whom are in this room. Helen Bowers, the notary, slid a packet across the table to my parents. 2 sets of documents, consent decrees, trustee resignations, a repayment schedule. You can sign now, Theodore said, or you can be served. My father lifted his head. He looked at the packet. He looked at his wife. He looked at his mother. He picked up the pen Helen had set on the table. It was a big ballpoint. The Mont Blanc was still on the floor of our dining room, 35 miles away. He signed the first page, then the second, then the third. My mother signed without reading. Theodore watched them sign. He did not gloat. He looked tired, in a way I had never seen him look tired. When the documents were done, my grandmother poured tea from her Wedgwood pot into her own cup. She did not offer my parents any. "Howard," she said, "you have been my son for 61 years. You will continue to be my son. I will, however, not be hosting you at Seymour Street in the foreseeable future. If you would like to send me a card at Christmas, I would prefer it not be signed by Eleanor." She turned to my mother. "Eleanor, I am sorry that you felt your only option was to forge my name. I would have preferred you ask." My mother did not answer. My grandmother sipped her tea. Before the last part. If you've ever had to set a boundary that cost you a family, take a breath here. I want you to remember it cost them too, just later, and just louder. Stay with me. The last 3 minutes are the part that mattered the most to me. It is now February, 3 months later. The lake house is still half frozen at the shoreline. The dock is still wrapped in tarp. The bird feeder above the kitchen window is busy. The civil restoration of the trust took 6 weeks. My parents signed a consent decree. They are repaying the $187,000 on a schedule with interest. They are no longer trustees. The state's attorney has not pursued the forgery as a criminal matter. The forgery is documented. The amendment is void. Owen moved into the lake house the second week of January. He chose it. He picked the bedroom that faces the water. He set up his Hannaford schedule with a co-worker who lives in town and drives him in for his shifts. I hired a care coordinator named Maeve who comes by twice a week. Owen picked her too. I drive up every Saturday. I do not stay overnight. He likes the house to himself on Saturday nights. He has a list of movies he is working through. I have not spoken to my parents since December 13th, except once. They came to my apartment on the last Sunday of December. I let them in. I did not offer them coffee. They sat on the couch. My mother cried. My father said nothing. I said one thing. You did not give me a choice for 22 years. I am giving you the same. I opened the door. I held it open. They left. I gave my apartment up at the end of January. I bought a small house in Burlington with the first portfolio distribution from the trust. It has a porch and a guest room, and a yard for a future dog. The first thing I unpacked into my kitchen was the black moleskin. I keep it on the counter next to the patient binder, the way I always have. Allison drove up from Boston for the closing. She brought champagne in her laptop bag. She does not drink champagne. She bought it for me. We did not open it that afternoon. I saved it for the Saturday Owen moved into the lake house. Theodore Whitman calls me on the first Tuesday of every month. He gives me the trust accounting in the same calm voice he used on the phone in November. The number goes up. The lake house roof is being replaced this spring. He has hired a real estate inspector for the boathouse. I sign things. My grandmother is teaching Owen gin rummy. She told him he is not allowed to win for at least a year because she has worked hard to be the family champion. He has agreed to those terms. I have not signed anything labeled caregiver since December 13th. I will not. Last weekend, I sat with Owen on the porch at the lake house. He had made himself a peanut butter sandwich and cut it into 4 perfect quadrants on a plate. He was eating it one quadrant at a time. He pointed at a pileated woodpecker on the white birch by the dock. "Claire," he said, "there's one of yours." "Mine? You said you saw one when you were 9. At the picnic." I wrote it down. He pulled his small spiral notebook out of his back pocket. He opened to a page near the front. There, in his careful handwriting, dated October of 2002, was the sentence. Claire saw a pileated woodpecker. She said it was beautiful. He smiled the small smile. "I keep good notes," he said. I sat on the porch. I watched the bird. I watched my brother eat his sandwich, one quadrant at a time, in his own house, on his own land, on a Saturday afternoon he had chosen. He was not my prison, I was not his guard. We were just 2 people on a porch watching a bird.